I am not set up today. Literally, I just rolled out of bed there, like,
Throw a t-shirt on like
five,
the sun.
five in the morning. You have me up for these things.
Well, I think you need to be blaming the Japanese government for not enacting daylight savings
Daylight
laws.
savings. I don't know. I
Yeah.
think it's debatable, like who's in the right and who's in the wrong. Is the Irish in the right? Because I don't think Owen, we definitely didn't have daylight savings back in the medieval period, did we? You know?
No, no, it's new. Ireland, until the First World War, Ireland had a different time zone from Britain. We
I
were
heard about that.
half an hour ahead.
Yeah.
Um, and Hi, Kat. And so in
Hey, Kat.
1922, when Ireland got independence,
Mm,
Ireland kept its Ireland time. However, Northern
mm.
Ireland didn't. So they got. Hi, Dennis. I have my car is full of diesel, but don't talk to me about that. I may kill somebody because I may have to run up to Dublin because of my mother any day now,
Mm,
and I want to get there for her last moments. And these bloody things, so no politics. So
mm,
Ireland, the Free State then basically abolished Irish time because people
mm.
were crossing the border and going back half an hour and then
Hmm?
crossing over again. So everybody was getting confused. So they just abolished it.
Mm.
Yeah, I
Uh,
know that the EU was looking to abolish it altogether as well because it doesn't have the benefits that it used to have after World War One.
Mm.
And then there was a discussion up here in the north about, well, does that mean because we're no longer part of the EU, or well, UK is no longer part of the EU, would we adopt that? So it could potentially, if the EU enact it,
Mm.
could be going back to that, or whether the Northern Ireland will keep it to tie in line with obviously our closest neighbour, and also um, the fact that we have 1 foot in the EU and 1 foot out. But Paul, it did spark up a briefly political debates from the usual suspects.
Mm.
But it's sort of just been put to a back burner from what I'm led to believe at the minute. So yeah, it could come back. It might not. It could come back. How you doing, Alan? Hey, Kevin. How are you doing? Um, yeah. So daylight savings are, but either way, for 6 months of the year, you get shafted doing these lives.
Aye, basically, because Japan doesn't do daylight savings, and you guys does.
It'll all go back to normal in like what is it, 6 months time? Or it's probably
Mm.
yeah, it's only just really happened, doesn't it? It's only like the third week of
'Cause
it.
no,
I think I read
we're in
one.
normal now. We just moved back to normal.
Well,
Mm.
what I mean is
It's
that
only
Owen's
it's in October
Phillips.
around Halloween we go
Mm.
backwards. That's when daylight savings comes in the winter
Hmm,
to give an extra
Yeah, yeah.
hour.
Mm.
yeah.
Because I think as well, while I was reading about, this whole daylight savings and Ireland being ahead of, what was it, behind Britain by, it's behind Britain by half an hour, isn't it? If that was the
Yeah,
case.
that's what I was saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think while I was reading that as well, I think Ireland didn't get its first clock until around the 19th century, wasn't it? If I remember right. The first big, massive clock up in Dublin until around the 19th century, which is
Yeah, but
funny
that
because, go on.
they only started standardizing things in the 19th century. I think
Mm,
there were my wife used to work in a science museum, so I used to know all these details. There were
yeah,
various meetings, I think in Greenwich and in Paris, where they standardized things like that.
yeah.
Hi, Paul. Oh, and it's good to see you back in men's clothing. I have no idea what that means.
What were you wearing last week?
Jeez, oh, hurry up that. You must be mistaken you were someone else.
Yeah.
Maybe Look, there's no such thing as men's or women's clothing anymore. It's 2026.
You're jumping in that modern, what was it called? Having that modern talk on you. We shouldn't be wearing clothing in 2026. Just be naked. All you
Hi,
modernists.
how you doing, Tom? Paul, how you doing? Ask a Breton if we should use daylight savings time or not.
The old
find me,
Breton people.
find me a
Go on.
Breton.
Well, you see, this is what I find is funny, is that we don't have modern clocks until the 19th century, but during the early medieval period, we were quite modern, weren't we? Because we did have sundials, didn't we, in Ireland? Like they have found, if you go to the monastic
Yeah,
settlements and stuff, they have found sundials. So it's quite funny. We were quite ahead during the early medieval period, but then after, like I think we just kind of between the Bronze Age, Golden Age, and the early medieval golden age of saints and scholars. I think we kind of ran too ahead, maybe. Maybe we went too ahead of the pack, especially when we're having a golden age when everyone else, except for the Byzantine Empire and Islam, of course, everyone else is having a dark age. So maybe we just kind of ran, had a bit of too much of a growth
agree.
spurt at the very start and then didn't grow after that.
And we also adopted the proper calendar before the English. Um,
Yeah.
Here's a good segue into tonight's subject. Hugh
Mm,
O'Neill and during the 9 Years' War, they were using the Gregorian calendar. The English
mm,
were using the old calendar, and
yeah.
also the English New Year was in March. It
Mm,
was on Labor Day,
good
sort of
for.
in the middle of March. So
Mm,
when you look at documents, it's very confusing because
yeah.
the the Battle of Kinsale, according to the English, it was in 1601. It actually happens in 1602.
Mm,
But then, if something happens, say in January 1599, the English will
yeah.
call it 1598. It's a
Yeah.
bit, it's a bit nuts.
Yeah. It just sounded, to be honest with you. Just going over to check there from a monetized. I just need to turn it on there. There we go. So we're flying anyway.
Someone,
You guys are monetized as
someone
well,
has
aren't you?
asked a question.
No.
Go
Uh,
on.
what was the cause of the Irish Dark Age, the 4th to the 8th century? I think I
What
read it was
dark age?
described as a very dark period in Irish history. Um,
We literally
no,
described
it's
the golden
not.
age of Ireland, complete reverse, actually.
Yeah,
With the collapse
yeah,
of the Roman Empire in the fourth century, we have the arrival of St. Patrick to first and foremost start off with, which I was saying that actually. A lot of people were talking complete garbage about St. Patrick on Patrick's Day. And I was pointing them towards the website confessio.ie. So you can look up and read all about St. Patrick on confessio.ie and his actual letters, the actual letters that St. Patrick wrote, he wrote two of them, the Confessio and the letter to Croticus. And
yeah.
then on top of that as well, we have the Annals of Ulster, which give us a little keyhole peek into the Golden Age of Ireland that kicks off around 550 with the last pagan king who converted to Christianity over in Clonmacnoise, Diarmid MacCurbal, who converted to Christianity in 550. And then kind of brings in this kind of golden age of saints and scholars up to around 793. And then it kind of becomes debatable if it's still a golden age of Ireland because it then kind of shifts into, as Claire Downham would point out, a more of an economic golden age rather than a golden age of saints and scholars because of the fact that the Vikings go in and they burn the monastic settlements in the what was it called, the edges of Ireland. So you could argue, oh well, from that point onwards is kind of the end of the golden age of saints and scholars. But it's not like we stopped making manuscripts. We do continue to make manuscripts, but perhaps maybe we just don't make the same standard as the Book of Kells. But the Book of Kells kind of gets finished during the Viking Age. So, what's your interpretation of that, Owen? Like, would you say the
Yeah,
Golden Age of Ireland ends in 793?
yeah, it is a golden age because, in a way, the Iron Age, the
Mm,
pre-Christian Gaelic era, is very much a dark age because we have very
mm,
limited knowledge of it. little
Mm.
archaeology, the population looks to have declined. If from the pollen sampling that has been done, there's a lot of
Mm.
areas which in the Bronze Age they would have been growing crops, and they
Mm.
suddenly become forest again.
Yeah.
Whereas from the 5th century on,
Mm.
the the population expands dramatically, which is
Yeah.
why you have suddenly up to 40,000 or more rainforests
Mm.
sort of around the place. So the Christianity brought or coincided with an economic and population boom.
Mm.
Um, that could have been to do with trade. We know there
Yeah.
was trade because St. Patrick, in his Confessio, as he
Mm.
mentions his escape from Ireland, where basically he
Yeah.
goes, I think it's in Wexford where he's supposed to have left from. He wanders, he
Mm.
goes up to these merchants and goes with them back to the Roman Empire.
Mm.
Then there is also some archaeology in North County Dublin. There's a big
Yeah.
place there which looks like it was a very big trading center. So,
Mm.
um, like I don't know, this golden period comes in with Christianity.
Yeah.
I would say it wasn't there before. It probably
Mm.
kicks in 50 years after or so after Patrick,
Yeah.
and that because it takes quite a while for Ireland to become fully Christian,
Mm.
and so it seems to be golden in many ways. Of course, if you dig down, you'll find loads of fights. It
Mm.
wasn't a peaceful place. There were
Yeah.
the elites, the lords were fighting all the time, and I'd
Yeah.
say a fair few of them were burning down churches, So, but it was the production, like the manuscripts, etc., was very good. But many of the manuscripts we have are later because they don't last all that long unless they're kept very
Yeah.
well and they're copied.
Mm.
Like the
Mm.
Book
Mm.
of Invasions, etc. I think the earliest copy is 1100. I
Mm.
could be wrong there.
Since when does being conquered by a foreign religion count as a golden age? Well, I don't think the Irish would have seen it as a foreign religion, to be honest with you. We've talked about this before. A lot of academics and historians today refer to as insular Christianity because of the fact that the Irish, although they seen themselves as part of the wider Roman Christian world, they were sort of adapting and changing on their own speed. There was no one with a whip there forcing Bridget to become a saint. There's no one with a whip forcing these people to do anything. They're got a hold of the Bible. The Roman Empire has, quote unquote, collapsed. So there's no one to kind of guide them in the way. So they are doing this not just on their own accord, um, but also on top of that as well, they have their own interpretation. So you definitely look that up, insular Christianity, and go down the rabbit hole of what is insular Christianity, because there's no one with a gun forcing any of these people to become what was it, Christianized. Yeah, I've constantly come across this thing of St. Patrick with a Gatling gun or something going around forcing the locals into Christianity. Like,
Yeah. And
where does this
one
interpretation
point,
bloody come from?
one point,
Go on. Sorry,
Oh,
there on.
you've lost sound.
and one point that's very important is, and it relates to a comment I want to come back to, is
Yeah.
there wasn't a pagan church to
Mm.
combat. There seemed to have been a multitude of beliefs. There wasn't a
Mm.
centralized church. It's one of the reasons
Yeah.
why the Catholic/Christian Church did well. It was centralized, and
Yeah.
it had Rome, England, then or Britain. Then in Ireland, it spread very quickly because there was nothing to combat it.
Yeah.
A lot comes down to beliefs of local kings, etc., and they could
Mm.
convert over. Some of the
Yeah.
population took longer. So it wasn't a
Mm.
conquest, it was something that spread and spread very fast.
But
Um,
it
sort of
doesn't in
like,
early medieval
like
Ireland,
so
even as
down
far
to a
as
comment
go on, go
um,
on.
by Ayla Ayla GCW. Problem is, Victorians really skewed our view of the medieval period. So everyone thinks
Yeah.
it was dark and dingy everywhere, always. It wasn't. But the Victorians
Mm.
skewed our view of basically everything from the before the Napoleonic times backwards.
Mm. Oh,
So
100%.
like the
Well,
Victorians messed up our view of history, full stop.
yeah.
Mm.
Well, yeah. Fully terribly, but now we're going to mess up
Like,
people's view on
are you hearing me?
history.
Because I'm having difficulty hearing you.
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you guys perfectly fine. I don't.
All right.
I think there might be a slight delay in there, but yeah, I can hear all of you guys fine. To be honest
Um,
with you, go on,
but now,
Nihal.
no, I was going to say, like I
Um,
said, but now we're going to skew everyone else's view on history because this is when we're talking about
there's
golden
loads of
age.
comments coming
There
in.
you
Mm.
go. Which brings us on to the topic of what we said
If
we were going to
O'Neill had
talk
won
about.
the 9 Years' War, would we have had a new golden Spanish age of Irish history? Perhaps, but um, it would have. Go ahead, Michal.
No, no, you go first. It's fine because I'll add on whatever you say. Have you got a?
Yeah,
You must have. I think Owen has a delay.
yeah, I was thinking you had a delay. All right, me scratching my nose there. Um,
Are you Owen? Are
the-
you listening through? Are you listening through Restream or
I
are
can
you
hear you,
listening?
but there seems to be a lag.
Yes. Are you
Yeah,
listening through Restream or are you listening through like YouTube or?
yeah.
Because if you're listening through
It
YouTube, you'll
just
get the delay. Feel like a news reporter.
yeah, I know, right?
it's stormy in the south and in the north, so I think
Ah,
Michal is getting blown away.
Is it? Is it me that's
Yeah,
delayed?
I just
I
jumped
think
in
you're grand,
there.
Mihal.
If
Yeah.
I'm being transmitted, I don't know. Um, what would have happened if O'Neill had won? You would have had a state in which it wasn't a very centralized state, a state in which several Gaelic lords and several old English lords would have been quite powerful.
Mm.
Many of these most would have been Catholic, and many would have had good relations with the Spanish. I think if the Battle of Kinsale hadn't turned into the disaster that it was, the war
Mm.
itself would have been a draw. There would have been Spanish forces and English forces. Uh, but on Elizabeth's death, there would have been a truce and a treaty, which would have
Mm.
left O'Neill in a much better position.
Mm.
Yeah, but the in the hypothetical situation that the Irish win the 9 Years' War, obviously
Mm.
Kinsale isn't a guaranteed. If they win Kinsale, they win the war.
Mm.
Obviously, what would have probably happened is it would have prolonged the war rather than sort of an immediate peace, but it certainly would have given the Irish and the Spanish more grounds to get better terms. And you know and this is all hypothetical because it never happened. But obviously the Irish could have retreated back to Ulster, regroup, potentially sort of extending the war, and Spain could possibly send another expeditionary force, forcing the English to grant these stronger terms of surrender. Or if we just say outright that they won, this because the English had spent millions of pounds in those days, which was a ridiculous amount today. Their army was heavily, depleted because they were sending troops across that were ill-equipped, and they'd lost a lot of men to disease. So maybe we could have been in a position where the English just sort of took a step back. Again, the problem lays in that the Tudor government saw Ireland not as just a extension of their kingdom, but as a potential backdoor of Spanish influence into their kingdom. So they may have wished to continue to, drag it on as long as possible, potentially. But as for O'Neill won the. I believe that what was it? His son and O'Donnell's son both when they petitioned the King of Scotland, there was talk of forming a republic, so as that nobody had, so as to sort of curb the power of the earls that would exist in an independent Ireland. So there's a lot of things, obviously, to dissect here. So if you want to just go from that, on my point of view.
Yeah, if Delaquila hadn't been such an idiot and insisted on the Gaelic Irish taking action which he didn't support, by doing nothing, Mountjoy would have been forced to fall back. Any military situation, when you're falling back in the face of the enemy, you're going to lose men. And in this case, it was midwinter. The English had lost thousands of people during the siege. So Mountjoy's retreat to Cork would have been a disaster. His army, it took the English 6 months to be able to take action again after winning the battle. So if they'd lost the battle, it would have been even longer. Probably Limerick and Galway. Limerick definitely would have been taken by the Spanish/Gaelic forces. Mountjoy may have been forced to fall back from Cork. This would have had a big impact. The Spanish were preparing to send secondary forces. They already sent a small group which had taken Castlehaven, Bearhaven, and Baltimore, I think, and they were preparing more men. The English would probably have fallen back to the Dublin region. Many of the conquests of Mountjoy, such as like he had forced so many lords to come up to him, they would have been lost. I don't think the Gaelic/Spanish forces would have been able to capture Dublin because they didn't have artillery, but they wouldn't have had to. To win the war, they had to stay with the upper hand when Elizabeth died. When Elizabeth dies, the war ends because Mountjoy and all them, their orders, their rests on a document signed by Elizabeth or stamped by Elizabeth. So once Elizabeth dies, it's the new king who decides what happens. Both Spain and England would have needed a truce, but they signed a truce in 1603 or 4 in London, in which basically the Spanish ignored Ireland. In this case, the truce would probably have given a lot of guarantees of rights, of religious rights to Ireland, and you may well have had a new state being set up which incorporated Gaelic lords who previously had been seen as the enemy as such, and Catholic Old English. And how that if this happened, probably there wouldn't have been like the 1640s wouldn't have happened. There wouldn't have been a plantation of Ulster.
Well, maybe it would have been different. Go on. But maybe it would have been different in the way that by the time you get up to 1640, you have the likes of Owen O'Neill, who's pushing for more Republican ideas. So maybe we would have had a war regardless, just it wouldn't have had a plantation element to it. We would have been more Republican versus Royalist, perhaps.
Yeah, if the Irish had won, how many Irish soldiers, especially from Ulster, would have gone and joined the Spanish army and been trained there? The English had a problem with Catholicism, though a lot of Northern England was still quite Catholic. But I think the fact that James made a complete mess of things. If he had if he'd kept O'Neill in Ulster, Ireland would have been there on his side. So when the parliamentarians start getting stroppy, you have a whole kingdom to back you up, as happened in 1690. So it triggers a whole sort of stuff. Another question is, if you have this Gaelic / Old English state in Ireland, how does that impact on the English move west? Because
Mm.
until the middle of the 16th century, England is looking to Europe. Queen
Yeah.
Elizabeth, if you look at her document, she signs herself as Queen of France.
Mm.
Still they're still living in Shakespeare, Henry V, etc. With
Yeah.
From the 17th century onwards, they start following the Spanish and the Portuguese west.
Mm.
Um, if with a, like if they had lost the war, that probably wouldn't have happened. Dennis was
Mm.
asking, can you speak a bit about the 9 Years' War in a European context? Yeah. So basically, what happens was Philip II, he inherits most of the Habsburg monarchy. Um,
Mm.
he inherits Spanish possessions in Italy and part of what is now France and the Low Countries. However,
Mm.
the Low Countries, a large part of it becomes Protestant. And
Mm.
Philip makes a complete hash of it, and war breaks out. And this
Mm.
war goes for 80 years. Um, but it becomes the First World War in a way because the Dutch are fighting the Spanish. And
Mm.
in 1580, Philip takes over Portugal. So suddenly he has this massive world empire, which
Mm.
includes all of South America, part of North America, the Philippines, other parts of Asia, and the
Mm.
Dutch start attacking that.
Yeah.
So there's fighting going on all over the world. The English get involved, which is what
Mm.
like Philip was quite pro-English, but they start supporting the Dutch rebels, the Dutch, which caused, and then the English, like Drake and the English pirates, start attacking Spanish shipping.
Mm.
So eventually you have a war between England, the Dutch, and the Spanish, and then the French, they join in because, well, first of all, France was completely messed up with religious wars, but
Mm.
uh, they don't like the Spanish. So whenever the Spanish were doing very well and looked like they were about to wipe out the Dutch rebels, the French could invade through the north. So you have this mad thing, and then um, O'Neill kind of says to the Spanish, "Look, you're failing against the English." Whereas
Mm.
I'm beating the crap out of the English. I'm sucking like the amount of money that the English, that Elizabeth is spending.
Mm.
However, Philip was very bureaucratic and he wasn't able to take advantage of the the offer of the chance of the opportunity presented by the 9 Years' War.
Mm.
I take there's in 1596 there's a fleet supposed to be going to Ireland, but in the end
Mm.
it's diverted to Brittany and it sails late and it gets sunk. The
Mm.
next year there's another fleet, but he decides to send that to England, and again it kind of gets sunk. Kinsale happens more by chance,
Okay.
um, but uh, Philip he could have been he got a very good return for his money in Ireland just by sending weapons and some money.
Mm.
He converted the English out of the Netherlands to a large extent.
Mm. Go on there,
Well,
Michal.
no, there's someone's asking on TikTok, did the Spanish survive around Sligo and South Donegal? And I'm guessing you're talking about the Spanish Armada, which is in 1588.
Mm.
Um, yeah, for the surrounding regions, you know, there were survivors who found refuge, um, uh, but many of them were robbed, many of them were murdered.
Mm.
Some of them famously got back to Spain. You've got the accounts of Captain the Cooler, I can never remember how to pronounce his name. And he's given shelter by the O'Rourke's and then in Leitrim, and then he sort of he moves on and he has a letter detailing his adventures and stuff like that. Um,
Mm.
Spaniards were saying Spaniards were receiving charitable care by Irish women and children before they would eventually escape to Spain via Scotland.
Mm.
And then you have the Inquisitions afterwards of English inquisitions of looking for evidence of surviving Spanish sailors and supplies. I just want to say if this has anything to do with the term the Black Irish, if any Spanish sailors stayed behind, somehow managed to integrate into and stay hidden from the English or rival Irish families and marry, they would have had the genetic imprint they would have had on the Irish is negligible. It's nothing. It's, if any. And that's even if they did, which is probably unlikely. But you've then put it on to another part of your question, Helen, that I'll go into about, which will tie more to what we're discussing, is, saying about the O'Dohertys, your connection to the O'Dohertys, and this sort of you say about the rebellion after the 9 Years' War, where they would go on to siege Derry. It's an interesting point because in this hypothetical situation where the Irish win the 9 Years' War, the O'Dohertys probably wouldn't have done so well out of that, considering at
Oh,
the time they had sided with the English.
oh no.
So they probably would have received some retribution
Mm,
for siding with the English. How much? They were quite a strong family in Inishowen.
mm,
They could have. They had long connections with, they being part of the Kinloan. They may have been able to garner some protection. But yeah, they in this situation, because they'd sided with the English, they probably would have not received favourable terms.
mm. I think that's one of the problems with this whole medieval perspective is that you always have families that join one side or the other side. You see that in England in the First Barons' War, where when the French king is invading England, you have English barons that join the side of the French. It's not considered treason the way we would see it today because there is no nationalism. And it's the same vice versa during the Hundred Years' War where you have French nobles joining the side of Henry V when he's doing the rounds around the place. It's just that's medieval mindset of my family first and foremost. I'll give loyalty to one noble or the other noble. That's always the way that these people are thinking during the medieval period. So just bear that in mind before people start going into the comments section going, "He's a traitor," or "He is a traitor." That would be right for the 9 Year
One,
War, wouldn't it?
one point, one point there that I find interesting is Hugh O'Neill pushed this idea of a Catholic nationhood, like sort of, he
Mm,
wasn't the first. Fitzmaurice was probably the first. O'Neill pushed
yeah.
it, and stressing the idea of rights for Catholics. But
Mm,
you find that really resonated among many people, like Neil Gareth, who
mm,
is in many accounts the big baddie because he was the
yeah.
cousin of Hugh O'Donnell and
Yeah.
basically went over to the English, who then
Mm,
who actually pulled a fast one on him, and he he ended up in the Tower of London for life. But
yeah.
if you look at there's a lot of letters between him and documents when he's
Mm,
discussing with Mountjoy and Docra his demands to come over. He demands freedom of religion. He copies what
mm,
O'Neill is doing. And the English kind of go, yeah, whatever, wink, wink, as if we have
mm,
no intention of doing this. But
mm,
what O'Neill was demanding was resonating, even with people who were prepared to fight for the English.
yeah. Here's a question here as well. Would the English lords press their non-loyalist tenants into service during this time? When you say non-loyalist, do you mean just people who wouldn't be keen into joining the side? Because they would have pressed everybody against Hugh O'Neill, really. Anyone that was willing to join the side of the English. Because the Tudor conquest at the time had been going on since 1534. So at this point, England had pushed all the way up to Hugh O'Neill's borders. And even Hugh O'Neill himself was meant to be on the side of the English at the very start of the conflict. And the main enemy was the O'Donnells, wasn't it? And then suddenly Hugh O'Neill does a big jump around, and then he becomes like kind of the king of the North, isn't it?
Yeah, so the O'Donnells were generally pro-English because
Mm,
England was further away from them than O'Neill. O'Neill was nearer.
mm,
Though there were lots of different O'Neills because it's such a big lordship.
yeah.
Um, but there were many people were not exactly pressed into service. There was rising out. There were, like many lords would come along, and they might fight alongside the English for a while and change
Mm,
over. People were changing all the time, and they were
yeah.
often changing sides strategically.
Mm,
And
mm,
they would they would ask permission to change
mm,
sides.
yeah.
There's O'Neill of the Fuse in
Yeah.
Armagh, and they are forever switching sides.
Yeah.
And like some people said, like sometimes some O'Neill's close relatives switch sides just to make sure if the English were nearby and were going to burn their corn or attack their crops, they would switch
Mm,
over for a while.
yeah. Yeah.
There were
Just,
a huge amount of Gaelic Irish in the ranks.
yeah.
Um, like the English system was completely and utterly corrupt.
Mm,
At the beginning of the war, the captains had great power. So you have a
mm,
company which could be officially between 100 and 150 men. It varied, sometimes 200.
mm,
A
mm,
certain amount of those were dead pays. So they were
yeah.
people who didn't get this, but the pay went to the captain or the chaplain or somebody else.
Mm,
But um, what many captains did was they like when because the death rate was enormous of
mm,
new recruits coming to Ireland died very quickly, most of them, and they would
yeah.
replace these with Gaelic soldiers
Mm,
who got lower pay, and
yeah.
sometimes like it would be a muster master. When the muster master comes along, quite
Yeah.
often the captain would go into the local village and basically rent soldiers for the day to stand in
Mm,
line and get counted.
mm,
So it was quite funny. Dennis has just asked something here. O'Neill had many wives. I assume it was Catholic in public, but Protestantism in his personal life. No, it was actually a continuation of Gaelic practice where you essentially, and like many lords would swap. You know, it was common enough to have over your life several official wives.
mm,
You must remember, childbirth was very dangerous at that stage.
yeah.
Many women died in childbirth or afterwards.
Mm.
Uh,
That's something
Gaelic
that's become
lords,
very. Go on.
Gaelic lords also tended to have concubines and things like that,
Mm,
mistresses. O'Neill
yeah.
certainly did.
Well, I think the Desmonds had polygamy on the go as well, where they had multiple partners. So I think it was practiced with the Anglo-Irish before the
Yeah,
well, definitely before the Tudor conquest. Anyway.
I think if you go anywhere in Europe,
Mm,
you're going to find any lord is going to have his official wife and various other wives.
mm,
Sort of like the history. There's a kind of 19th century, very Puritan version of history, which has
yeah.
come to us, where they kind of they go through, they cancel out certain things when people were doing things that they considered naughty.
Yeah, yeah. Lance, just be careful with the language there. I don't mind Tony. Tony's actually quite cute with the way he's swearing there in the comment section. If you could just take note of how Tony's swearing in the comment section, that'd be great. Because some of you guys are swearing in the comment section and you're just writing out the word. Will you ever be cute in the comment section if you're going to start swearing? Because you know yourself, Big Brother's watching and he'll start kicking you out. So if you could just take note of how Tony's swearing in the comment section and just take note of that. Just edit the words, will you? Start being cute. Because I don't want you guys getting kicked out and us all getting into trouble because you're all swearing. I have no problems with anyone swearing in the comment section. Just be cute about it, will you? Sorry about that one. Any comments or anything we want to cover before we'll start pushing on?
No, I think obviously, like say the whole wives thing, concubines, mistresses. It would we know of many lines that exist, and we don't even know who their mothers are, and that's not
Mm,
just from poor recording of women in history, which was very common practice, as we all know, but
mm,
it was also commonplace that, um, you know, you would just have cadet branches of butlers who are predominantly pro-English, leaning, all through their history. Fitzgeralds who would sort of straddle the line, and then you have the Gaelic families that are constantly taken part. So
mm,
it's why we have so many descendants of these individuals, and of the surname. Not the only reason, without going into the whole clan system again tonight, but it's certainly one of them. So, yeah, and I agree with Owen's earlier comments before about, and yours expanding on modern families, um, interpretations of the past, of like whose family sort of sided on the side of this war and whose family sided on this war. When what you stated is very true, that families were both on, multiple sides. So, yeah, you had the McDavids and Cahir O'Doherty on the side of the English. They would not taken into context the reason why they were on the side of the English. They were promised, if they sided with
mm,
the English, that they would be left unharassed by this mass amount of incoming plantations that were sort of happening at the time, and these intrusions of their territory, and they were told they would be unharassed. Unfortunately for them, they
mm,
believed that, and it's why they rebel literally in 1609, I think it is, and siege Derry, because their promises, the English promises, were not kept. But on the same side, the O'Neills, like Owen has said, you have Turlough, Henry O'Neill, of the Fews, and Henry Oak, McShane O'Neill, who are, sort of being used by the English, to sort of separate the O'Neills up a bit. These individuals are doing it for multiple different reasons. Never mind the millions of local lads just cutting about
mm,
their daily business.
mm. Mostly, I blocked them. They were using, I was being polite to them mostly, and yeah, using the racist terms he was using, I just got rid of him as quick as I was being polite there with telling the lads here, be cute about your language, and then for him to start using racist comments and stuff, mostly I just got rid of him.
There was
I just
another
blocked
guy
him
I
out. He was
blocked
taking
earlier
the piss.
for talking about
Yeah,
modern
yeah, yeah.
politics and
No,
immigration.
it's not the modern politics I don't mind. To a certain degree, lads, I'd rather just talk about the 9 Years' War, to be honest with you. But as mostly pointed out there, I give him an inch, and your man just goes off and goes completely racist in the comment section when there's no need for that. So chop chop, off he goes. Just a fucking doofus, really. So he's blocked mostly, so don't panic about him. He's gone. And if anyone else starts up like that, I'll just get rid of him as well, mostly, to be honest with you. We're here having the crack, talking about the 9 Years' War. If people want to start swearing, swear away, just be cute about it. But racism, like, why? We're talking about the 9 Years' War,
Ernest,
Except for gingers. You can be racist towards gingers, no
Ernest,
problem.
Ernest, you're completely right. You're completely right. I'm not going to share the comment, but yeah, you're completely right.
Mm,
Pushing certain agendas. I won't use your words, but you're right.
yeah.
um, uh,
Polygamy.
yeah, no. I mean, I'm just going to go into uh, um, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like which modern people throwing us off. I mean, where were we up to? We're up to splitting of families.
Mm,
Maybe we would talk about some of the families that maybe would have done all right under this new hypothetical Irish sort of um, uh, um, confederacy, or if the Irish had won.
yeah, the Irish
The
Confederacy.
interest,
Because you look like you're downloading
I,
information because of all the amount of families that actually would have been on the
well,
positive side if they had won the
I mean, you've
war.
got
Because I know the O'Sullivans would have been
Yeah,
good,
the
wouldn't they?
O'Sullivans would have been good. The Maguires, the O'Rourke's, the O'Reillys, the McSweeney's, the O'Cahans, McCarthy's, O'Leary's, O'Mahony's, Kavanagh's, O'Byrne's, O'Toole's, O'Kavanaugh's, McMurray's. They'd have all been grand. And possibly even the Fitzgeralds may have got some of their... They had like 500,000 acres confiscated during the Desmond Rebellions. They could have seen or petitioned for some of that land back. There's certainly some families that would have, because there was talks of by O'Neill in some of the during the war about this sort of topic, about the fact that lands had been taken and previous laws, and it was a topic that would actually be carried on until even during the plantations into the Jacobite Wars. You know, it was constantly raised that, you know, one of the issues was the amount of lands that had been taken, and to have some of these lands reinstated. What do you reckon? No.
Go on there, on.
I'm having difficulty hearing you, but land ownership changed a lot, and yes, because of military reasons, rebellion, etc. But in the first 2 or 3 decades after the end of the 9 Years' War, a huge amount of Gaelic lords lost land for economic reasons, because up until the 1590s, there was a lot of land in Ireland and a low population, and many lords would mortgage land, like McCarthy Moore did it. They'd mortgage land to someone from a town who'd give them money, which they'd then spend, and you know, they could get the money back by raiding, etc. But under the Stewarts, they were faced with a new economic system. Cash starts coming in, coins start coming in, and a huge amount of Gaelic lords were unable to handle this, and they start selling their fields, their lands, and you can. That's one of the reasons for 1641. So you have a small group of Gaelic lords who've managed to hold on to their positions, but they're all heavily indebted. They're losing their land, and at the same time, there were many English who would go around, and they would go to England and produce some document that said, oh, like the Carews in Munster, that they were given this land 600 years ago or 300 years ago, so therefore they had a right to it, and McCarthy or someone would lose land. So the Gaelic lords, the ones that survived, had this huge difficulty in coping with the new economy and with a political system that was completely biased against them. Like in one of the first parliaments under the Stewarts, they created a whole pile of MPs that were basically Protestants. So basically the Catholics, despite being the majority, were the minority in Parliament.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, when you look at Hugh Montgomery, James Hamilton, both Scottish undertakers who took advantage of that sort of power vacuum after, and sort of implemented the plantations of Ulster. These sort of things would never have happened. English servitors, the Bingleys, the Vaughans, Harts, the Stewarts, the Parsons, Cunninghams, the Stewarts, the Pointses, they would not have been awarded this land either for their part in the campaign. But obviously on the flip side of that, you're saying about mortgaging lands, obviously the Gaelic Irish as well would have probably and wrongly used this time, this sort of power vacuum that happened when in a new Ireland, however it looked, to disperse previous English and Scottish or Protestant or even rivals who maybe weren't seen as loyal during the Tudor conquest of Ireland against the English, as happened with every other campaign before and after, where it was you'd have this sort of almost turmoil where families were now using this this gap, this vacuum to enhance their own wealth, position, prestige. So I imagine it'd be very messy afterwards, especially when it came to land. You would have, and who knows, that could have been used as a tool by the English again. They were already using it beforehand and during to sort of get a wee bit of a foothold back into Ireland to continue the campaign.
Yeah. It's interesting because I see the comment section as well pointing out that most likely after the 9 Year War, there would have definitely been civil strife amongst the Gaelic lords and the Anglo Irish lords as well, especially over land and property. And it's interesting, like, what kind of government would we have after the 9 Years' War? Would we be pushing more for Republican ideas and more kind of Irish Parliament? Or would we have, like, you've some people pointing out online, a kind of high king with Hugh O'Neill at the very top? What kind of government, is there any indications whatsoever what sort of government we would have after the 9 Years' War if Hugh O'Neill had prevailed?
I think that probably it would have been James of Scotland, but he um, wouldn't have been able to rule Ireland very tightly. Um, the the Tudors centralized England quite a bit.
Yeah.
They were fortunate in that the Wars of Roses wiped out a huge amount of nobles. Um, this happens all over Europe. You have the growth in centralized power. In Ireland, it may well have been a bit like, I know Hiram Morgan made this comparison about 30 or 40 years ago with Poland. In Poland, the local lords are very powerful. So, but at the same time, I think O'Neill, perhaps Thomond, the O'Briens, one of the Burkes, the perhaps the Desmond, definitely the Ormonds, they would have grown in power. So you might have had 3 or 4 lords with a huge amount of power. Then you would have had a government based in London, no, sorry, based in Dublin, but it would probably have had to incorporate O'Neill and O'Donnell, various other Catholic lords. Sort of what James did in Scotland. James was quite good at bringing in many of the obtainment. He calmed down the Highlands, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. You would have had something like that. You would have a state in which the big magnates would have been interested in keeping this state going. The Spanish would have been interested in keeping the Irish state going because it distracted the English, and so would the French. You could have had a chance whereby the English would have got annoyed and invaded and started another war. That's a strong possibility.
It's funny though, because go on.
I was going to say, like, it's all lines of speculation, but I just
well, I mean, but this one does have a grain of truth, not truth, but a grain of foundation to it, in the sense of, you've obviously got the document, the 1626 Republican document, which was so you have, it's like a political vision that was laid out. If successful, an Irish Republic, would have been established rather than a monarchy, and it's sort of explicitly designed to prevent the earls from fighting over who had the throne of Ireland. And that's
what document are you talking about?
It's the is it not the 1620? There was a 1626 Republican document. I don't know if it was actually drawn, but it was coined as a possibility. This is proto-Republican, obviously, by Owen and the O'Donnell and O'Hugh sons in Spain, where they were trying to argue about what what Ireland would look like if Spain, because obviously you have, if Spain are pushing for the independence of Ireland, what is their position? What is their hold on this?
Yeah,
What is
yeah,
their and so they were. There was also talk about. I think that they mentioned about maybe O'Neill being like a what was the title? But anyway, it was sort of like, Ireland, for all intents and purposes, becomes a sort of part of Spain, but not a part of Spain. It becomes this.
Mm.
yeah.
It becomes the Isle of Man of Spain.
Yeah, but that that's written in the 1620s after the defeat.
Yes,
In
it's written. Yeah.
1601, Hugh O'Neill published a proclamation with his war aims, and
Mm.
essentially he is asking for a sort of a conservative state in which which the powerful lords um, have a lot of power, which guarantees freedom of religion, which is
Mm.
it's quite a nationalistic thing. Sort of, Irish people are allowed trade in England using Irish ships.
Mm.
Most of the people in the council in Dublin would have been Irish. Um, it allows for an English monarchy, though a monarch at a different stage. O'Neill offers the crown to Spain. That
Mm.
probably wouldn't have happened.
Mm,
Um, and remember, when James comes in, both James and Spain want peace. The English and the Spanish want peace. They fought each other into a stalemate. Spain is
Mm.
more concerned with defeating the Dutch. That war goes on
Yeah.
to 1648.
Mm.
Um, so my belief is that James would have been king, but in a much looser way. And certainly you wouldn't have people like Chichester and Davis running Ireland. They would have been replaced perhaps by, for example, the Moors of uh, who got Mellifont. They were very close to Hugh O'Neill and other people like that. Maybe someone like
Mm.
Tyrrell,
Mm.
um, Ormond even, or the Earl of Kildare, who was actually related to Hugh O'Neill and more directly to Shane O'Neill.
Mm.
Dennis is
Interesting.
asking how many proto-republic states would have been in Europe at that time. Basically, Holland, the Netherlands.
Oh,
Um,
Venice
you
as
had
well.
prior
The
to
what was
that,
it? Florence and Venice.
you had, prior to that, you had the Hansa League, which was kind of
Mm.
city states, and you had some in like independent cities, etc., and republics
Mm.
in Italy. But I think by 1600, essentially most of Italy was in the hands of the Spanish.
Mm.
Sort of,
Yeah.
you have the Kingdom of Savoy, which was a Spanish satellite in a way. I think the Spanish held Florence. The Pope was in Rome, and the Papal States were quite big. Um, so there weren't that many proto-republics. Sort of
Mm.
the Netherlands was one, but then it gets a king. It remains
Yeah.
a republic, but has a king. Because, like, although I think they called him the stadtholder, William of Orange was the king of the Netherlands, despite the
Mm.
fact it is the Dutch Republic.
Yeah. Was the Dutch were quite strange at that point because don't they end up beating to death anybody who kind of takes on the role as a dictator? Because there's famous cases of people kind of getting too
Well,
ahead of their
there's one
status, the
famous
public
case.
beating them to death.
There's one
What's
famous
that?
case, but like there's one famous case
Mm.
in the 1620s or 30s. This guy, they hung him and his brother, and I think they cooked and
Yeah.
ate him or something. Something very bizarre.
Yeah,
But
he was beaten to death. He because they blamed him. He took kind of, as we would say in Ireland, he kind of got some notions, and then when the shit hit the fan, he kind of got blamed for it. And I think his brother was recovering from something at the time, so they ended up dragging him and his brother out. The two of them got beaten to death, but the crowd kind of got pure sadists in the way that they were tearing their bodies apart. But by the time they were done, their bodies were hung upside down, and there's a very famous painting of it because the painting is so disturbing to look at. Can't remember. I'll
Yeah.
quickly look up the name of the painting there. But 1620, that was it. The Netherlands. Look up the painting there on it, and you'll see how gruesome and terrifying the photo is. The artist went out to paint it, and what he did was he paid a peasant boy just with a candle, so you can actually see the peasant boy with the candle lighting up these two bodies. And yeah, very, very, very gruesome. And you're right; they did strange things to the bodies, very, very strange things to the bodies before finally hanging them up. So yeah.
But public executions at that time were really, really, really gruesome, and you
Mm,
have all sorts of bizarre things like the English executed lots of Catholic priests, especially Jesuits, and these
mm,
people they'd essentially give a sermon before being killed, and
yeah.
then it was quite common for supporters, even another the public, they would come up and dip bits of cloth into their blood and stuff like that. And
Mm.
the execution was brutal. I won't go into the full details because we'll get demonetized. And other
Mm,
ones like, you're put on the wheel and you're swung around in this wheel and you're hit with sledgehammers and stuff like that.
mm,
Um, there was a case of like um, not not Faith McHugh, but one of his closest men was captured and tortured. The English used
mm,
torture quite a bit. There's a case of someone being hung in chains, I think in 1598, outside Cork City. So
mm,
basically, this guy had been semi-beaten to death, and then they just let him, like they didn't hang him, kill. They just left him dying outside the city.
mm,
So it was very, very, very gruesome.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can always go down to Cork's prison if you haven't been down to Cork prison before. Definitely go down to Cork prison because there's a good few gruesome tales inside the Cork prison as well. If anybody's looking for proper gruesome stuff,
Here,
um,
there's
go on.
still saying about obviously after the 9 years war, you have the flight of the earls, and saying the earls of the young children to be educated at the Irish College of St. Anthony. Earls arrived at Rome in 1608 and were granted a small pension by the Pope. Actually, not all of the children had prosperous beginnings, to be sensitive. An interesting one is Mary O'Donnell,
Mm,
who was the daughter. She would make it to Rome, and had petitioned for help of any
mm,
kind, and had been rejected, and then had been called out as possibly not even being Mary of Mary O'Donnell, and she basically ended up going around a few courts in Europe trying to, just get a living before she would marry a sort of unnamed Irishman and disappear into the common people and never be heard of again. It's quite an
mm,
interesting story of Mary O'Donnell, but yeah, the children didn't have. Not all the children had help. Basically, some were left to their own devices, unfortunately.
mm.
Because
The
like
guillotine, that's a horrible device. Go on.
Hugh O'Neill's children, his youngest one was left behind in Ireland, and
Mm,
he ended up in the Tower of London. He was in Eton for a while, then he disappears. So
mm,
he obviously died. We don't know what happened to him. Um,
yeah.
but one of his other sons, I think two of his other sons end up in the Spanish army. They
Mm.
didn't go with
Mm,
him to Rome. Um, but of the ones who go to Rome, they all die very, very quickly. And the oldest is Hugh O'Neill. He's the only one who lasts. Um,
mm,
it's There is a book by Micheline Carney Walsh on the Flight of the Earls where she actually gathers and translates Spanish documents. It's a very, very good book. It's probably 50
mm,
years old by now, but I really recommend it. It's Hugh. Someone has already mentioned O'Neill was trying to get to Spain. He wanted to go to Spain to get military support, but he didn't make it because of the weather. But O'Neill was
Mm,
too important to the Spanish. He was a brilliant weapon. He was so they kept him in Rome because they wanted him on their side, but they would never let him go
mm,
back because he was too important. So he ended up kind of being almost a prisoner in Rome, writing letters saying, "Please just give me a ship and send me back. I want to die in my own land." It's interesting. Another thing
mm,
I made a video about this is the Flight of the Earls was a disaster, but it was triggered in a way by Lord Hoth, St. Lawrence,
okay.
who was basically he was very close to O'Neill's son. He had been in the Netherlands trying to
Mm,
get a job in the Spanish army, but he was also giving information to England. And he was one of those
oh,
who spread the rumor that O'Neill was going to be arrested by James, which was probably wrong. He wouldn't
mm,
have been. Um, so St. Lawrence, to a great extent, is responsible for the flight of the Earls, but he doesn't get any blame in the history for that. Like there's that stupid story which is completely untrue about one of the MacMahons
mm,
betraying at the Battle of Kinsale. It's completely rubbish. It's
mm,
made up much later, and he becomes a bad guy for years. Whereas Saint Lawrence, who betrays them, who causes like this mega disaster, the flight of the Earls, and no one says anything about him. It's funny the way historical memory works.
mm. Yeah, yeah, we're kind of aware that Owen sounds like a hot box tonight, or whatever you guys were saying earlier. Right, seems to be some kind of thing
I
with
think it's the storm.
Owen's microphone's bit slow. What's that? Sorry, Owen.
I think it's the storm because I'm not
Yeah.
hearing anything you two say.
Ah, right, right, right. Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, it probably is the storm tonight. What was I going to bloody say? And some of you guys as well. Actually, I want to ask Owen, what's the story with Lawrence? Why did he purposely spread the rumors about James trying to arrest him and stuff? Was it just fun rumors, or did he like have an agenda of trying to
He
get
was
rid of
trying to
Owen?
keep in with both sides, and I think he was a bit unstable mentally.
Okay.
Um, and I don't think he was a nice person.
Yeah.
And maybe he actually did think that, because he'd given the English loads of, he had told them there was this conspiracy.
Mm,
So he knew he had given the English information, which was more concerned with O'Donnell, not with O'Neill. Um,
mm,
but maybe he thought O'Neill would be arrested. But
mm,
uh, I think O'Neill should have gone. He'd gone to England before, to London before.
mm,
If he had gone and been arrested, the Spanish would have been annoyed. Uh, so would Ulster. And remember, O'Neill
mm,
still had a lot of veterans, a lot of men in Ulster. James was desperately trying to reduce military expenditure.
mm.
There weren't many English soldiers in Ireland. Um, uh, so, like, sort of, if O'Neill had gone and been arrested, he probably would have been sent home shortly afterwards. Um, he panicked or was panicked by somebody else.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. All right. And there was another good comment there as well. Was the 9 Years' War the closest we ever got to independence until the 20th century? I'll give my interpretation first and I'll hand it over to you guys. But I feel like the 9 Years' War wasn't the final. I know it's the final kind of act for the kind of Gaelic lords and all that sort of stuff, for that sort of independence. But I don't feel it's the final Irish independence, because I still feel that we had obviously the War of the Three Kingdoms afterwards of Ireland and Britain. And then after that, we still had the William Knight and Jacobite Wars as well. So I don't feel it's the last Irish War of Independence. Until going up to 1798 and all that kind of stuff. But on the flip side of things, it is the last kind of Gaelic hurrah, unless I'm mistaken on that one. What's your interpretation on that, Owen and Michal?
I think yes, it was the closest to getting, not exactly getting independence. It
Mm,
was the closest to for Ireland to follow a different historical path, a path that
Mm.
would have preserved Gaelic culture or
yeah.
Gaelic Ireland. Gaelic Ireland disappears within a century. It's gone. In the 1690s, no one talks about the Gaelic Irish. They talk about Catholic Irish.
Mm,
This would have preserved Gaelic culture, would have allowed Gaelic Ireland exist. Someone just said they hate the term Gaelic. I don't know why. Um,
it's the fat conductor. He probably just likes us all to be called British. I know. I think British would be a better answer, to be honest with you.
um,
Go on, on.
so it would have, like, for example, in the 1640s, they could have won. They could have got some sort of independence. But
Mm,
at that stage, the Gaelic lordships had been destroyed.
yeah.
Ireland had become very anglicized in its political structures.
Mm,
Again, 1690, uh, the Irish could have, the Jacobites could have won. And then in
mm,
1796, if the if the French, if the weather had been different and the French had managed to land those men, the
mm,
history would have been different.
mm,
But the 9 Years' War was the closest to Gaelic Ireland remaining
mm.
existing.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think the question in the comment section to be properly kind of squared away. I think people are asking what is the definition of Gaelic in the 9 Years' War. Do you guys have any idea what the definition of what is Gaelic in the 9 Year War? I think that's a better way to ask that question.
It's the Gaelic, the Gaelic, the people who spoke the Irish language,
Mm,
who um, were descended from like the Iron Age Ireland. They weren't. Yes, they would. They had all intermarried at some stage with Norman
mm,
descendants, English Vikings, but they were. It was the political slash social slash culture that had been in Ireland since approximately 500 and who spoke Irish.
mm,
Yeah, I agree. It's
And
just a term.
they followed, they, their political system was, and cultural system, it was very decentralized. Power
mm.
was very spread out, very realistic. There was a social contract. Like the Lord was supposed to defend you. If he didn't defend you, you could get another Lord. If you were a
Mm,
peasant, you
mm.
could walk off.
The another one as well. I just need to make a quick correction on that one, and Owen could definitely expand on this one. I believe the Irish style of fighting during the 9 Years' War was amazing, in my opinion. The current tactics mixed in with the hobbler and their speed and light packing was another bonus. Just to expand on that one, I'm not sure if Caveman is aware of this, but there's a huge revolution going into the 9 Years' War when it comes down to tactics and warfare. Jim O'Neill, the 9 Years' War, and he's got two new books out as well that completely expands on this kind of Gaelic revolution of warfare that happens during the 9 Years' War. But I think you expanded on this one before as well, Owen. We take on a lot of Spanish tactics going into the 9 Years' War, don't we?
Yes and no. Yes and
Mm,
no. Uh, Basically, the Gaelic army becomes they start using firearms, the
mm,
caliber musket, which is a light firearm. Um, its its problem is it doesn't have a very long aim. I think it's about 50 meters. Like after 50 meters, you have no chance of
mm,
hitting somebody. Um, so it's a force that is built on maneuver, that is very fast and very light.
mm,
Um, they have pikes as well, but their pikes are kind of light pikes. They don't. Um, they're like elsewhere in Europe. So they're the Spanish and the English and the Dutch. they have much heavier pikes that can be used to attack.
Mm,
Whereas the Irish army is more they fight more loosely. Their horse is a big problem. The infantry gets modernized, gets changed. The cavalry doesn't.
mm,
It's good for carrying out raids. It's good for carrying out scouting. It's good for not getting bogged down, getting stuck in a bog. But when it comes to an open battle uh,
mm,
against the English horse, they're no good. Um,
mm,
and like the Galloglass disappear partly because um, the sons of Shane O'Neill, some of whom were sons of one of their mother was Scottish, they turn a lot of the Scottish, like in the islands, against him, and
mm,
also because we're trying to halt that trade as well. But O'Neill, I think there's 20,000 plus men in Gaelic Ireland and the Gaelicized lordships. Not all on
mm.
O'Neill's side, of course, but and many of these have access to weapons. The problem is that when towards the end of the war, when there's much larger English forces and under Mountjoy, where there's constant warfare, the,
Mm.
the they go through their supplies of gunpowder very quickly.
Mm. Fat controller, I would hate to be hanging out with you, man. Walking around downtown, going, calling everybody in what was it called? Especially if we went down to places like Mallow, which was constructed by the Normans. Imagine walking downtown with yourself and you're calling everybody English. Jeez, you probably get a few punches in the head, to be honest with you, man. I assume you're living up in the north, are you? Just because the fact that you only believe that people of the O'Neills are the only ones that are Gael, because it's kind of a strange interpretation of the world to have this belief. It's definitely not a Munster interpretation because I'm quite confident that people of the McCarthys, the Desmond Fitzgeralds, and also the O'Briens see themselves as being Irish from time to time. I think it depends on what era you're talking about because you're not really defining the era you're talking about. Um, when it comes down to the definition of, and I'm literally now just talking about the 9 Years' War, just to pin it down, and I'm not talking about the present day. I'm just going to talk about the 9 Years' War here, and I'm going to ask on this one. What's the definition of being Irish in a 9 Years' War? And is there a difference between being Irish and being Gael? And then you've got the others as well, like the Barrys, for example, because the Barrys do define themselves as Old English during the 9 Years' War, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the the 9 Years' War is a time where new identities are being made
Mm,
and are changing. There's a famous
yeah.
quote from one of the Old English. He says, "Oh, in Ireland they call me English, in England they call me Irish," and
Mm,
I think one of the St. Lawrences or someone, he goes to the English court and Elizabeth says, "Can you speak English?" She thought he
mm,
couldn't speak English. The Old English saw themselves as English. They were the English who were born in Ireland, the same
mm,
as until Mary Tudor lost Calais. The
mm,
the people who were born in Calais saw themselves as English who happened to be born
mm,
in the Pale of France, as it was referred to at times. Um, they O'Neill's pushes something different, the idea of Irishness based on Catholicism. The English were already seeing the Old English and the Gaelic Irish as Irish. But at that stage, there's no Irish word for Irish. There's an Irish word for
mm.
Gaelic,
Yeah,
but it's only in the 1620s that the term Erenach, which is Irish, gets coined.
mm,
Uh,
yeah.
so Hugh O'Neill is pushing this thing of this Irishness, but he's pushing it in English and Latin to an
Mm,
extent. So saying that Desmond, that Fitzmaurice, that Tyrrell, these are all Irish, Catholic Irish against the English. But Desmond and them, Fitzgerald, Ormond to an extent, they regard themselves as English, but kind of Irish at the same time.
The Fat Controller having his own interpretation. I would definitely 100% definitely disagree with that one for sure. The Onakta,
There's no evidence. It drives me mad when people saying that this group were not Gaelic or the Éireann were pre-Gaelic. No, like sort of Gaelic culture emerges. We have if you look at Irish history, the history of Ireland, you have in the Neolithic, we have the Passage Tomb culture, an amazing culture. We have no idea what those people call themselves. They disappear. Their DNA has largely gone. Then along comes Bronze Age Ireland, which is the last big change in Irish DNA. You have Belbeaker culture and then perhaps other cultures. Again, we don't know what they call themselves. Around 500, perhaps slightly before, Irish, what the Americans call Gaelic, starts getting spoken. You have the emergence with the Iron Age of Gaelic Ireland. Everybody in Ireland then was Gaelic. They were speaking Irish. You cannot say that this group were, and that none of them were Scythians. Do you know how long it is from Scythia to get to Ireland? Sorry, that's crap. I'm running out of patience because
what the first written evidence is 100 AD of Gaelic Irish. We'll call it. I know, obviously, you've got different. It gets broken down into early archaic Irish, old Irish, But let's just, for all intents and purposes, Q Celtics speaking people, 100 AD is the first sort of evidence of it. Historians have already established that for it to be spoken and to be used, it has to have been there for a long period of time. Just because the first evidence of it comes into archaeological radars, it doesn't matter if it's 100 AD, or not. By the time it's being written down and used, for families for the societies to be using at the time, it has to have already been long established in that area. So just because we have a earmarked radiocarbon dating of a stone that has archaic Irish written on it, doesn't mean that's the first day Irish turned up. Someone didn't rock off the boat and just carve, Turlough was here, and then we've just gone, that's the start date of Gaelic Irish. Most likely, like Owen has sort of stipulated there, I think Owen and I are on the same camp as this, that actually Gaelic Irish is more of a natural occurrence in Irish history, where it's not a society coming in, but it's naturally formed by multiple micro transactions of trade, intermarriage, cultural sharing, all these sort of warfare, all these micro migrants coming into the country, and Irish people leaving the country and coming back to form the Gaelic culture in Ireland. But we can see that there has been multiple migrations from the Mesolithic era into Ireland, all having their impact on the society or culture that would come out of that. And parts of Western Scotland as well. I'm more of in the camp that Gaelic is also native to that point. PS2, I don't.
I just want to butt in there. Fat Controller, I'm sorry to say this. I'm going to have to apologize. What you're quoting from there about the Onakta being from Gaul or Roman Britain, Shane Kent made that up in 2015. He made that up. Shane Kent made that up. I can bring him onto the show and he can explain that he made that up as an April Fool's joke to the mayor of Cork. The mayor of Cork believed, because Shane Kent said so, that the people of Cork were Romans, that they were civilized and above everyone else. He did that as an April Fool's joke, okay? So I know where you're quoting from. And I just want to highlight the fact that Shane Kent was joking as a joke back in, it was 2015 or 2016. He just made the whole thing up. So what you're quoting from is Shane Kent, right? Shane Kent, brilliant lad, but he was joking. That was a joke he said back.
He wants to come on the channel, actually. He wants to come on the channel.
Fat Controller.
No,
I'll
Shane
have him.
Kent. Shane,
Oh yeah,
Shane Kent
Shane.
was
I'll
it.
have Shane Kent. Yeah, I'll have Shane Kent come in, and he could explain that that was an April Fool's joke. He was joking. Okay,
It's on
he made that
Wikipedia
all
now,
up.
though. It made its way to Wikipedia, Shane.
Oh man, like he said that, and the mayor of Cork actually believed it. And the mayor of Cork went around telling people that the Cork was civilized the Romans. I shit you not. And the whole Oenocta and all that stuff. Shane Kent made all that up. So what you're talking about is what Shane Kent made up. Okay, I was talking to him. I got worked up and angry about it actually back in what was it 2016, because the mayor of Cork came to me. He was very passionate about it, and I was like, no, we're not. We're blasted Irish. We're not Romans, like, you know. So I know where you actually got that from. Shane Kent made it up as a joke. He was joking, like, and a lot of people ended up getting really annoyed at Shane Kent because a lot of people actually believed that, like. So just to kill that in the water. Anytime somebody says that the Irish are Romans, that was an April Fool's joke made up by Shane Kent. Shane Kent made that up. I'll have him on the show just to tell you he made that up. The Irish are not Romans. You do have the Roman Britain style that comes into Ireland, like a fashion style. Okay, so that whole clothing and everything, yeah, that may have come into Ireland. It definitely influenced the language. So when people are talking about Roman Britain, they're talking about a style and influence that comes into Ireland. The Irish are not Romans, okay? So I just want to highlight that one. That was a joke by
Well,
Shane Kent,
Gauls,
okay?
I think. No, Gauls. He says they're Gauls, not Romans. But I'm guess I think
The
it's
Gauls are
from.
different again. Go on.
No, no. What I mean is the. I think the term on Wikipedia is that they may be connected to the Gauls, and I believe it's through Roman aggression that the Gauls end up here. Just quickly, 1 second. The Ghost of Robert the Bruce. I actually want to just tip the hat to you. You've left a rather large comment on one of my videos that seems very interesting in a good way. That I just want to say I intend to read it when I've got a bit of time. I've earmarked it. So, um,
Mm.
but he actually put another comment here that I kind of think is a very brief but it kind of gets the point quite well. Developed due to a mix of Celtic tribal dialects mixed in an Iron Age Ireland to give a very brief explanation. That's sort of how I feel with it, that this Q Celtic formed naturally in Ireland and parts of Western Scotland due to these microtransactions with the natives, there wasn't this genocide of pre-Celtic speaking people who'd already settled in Ireland. I think people say about 150 years, 200 years before the Gaels came into Ireland. But there was the model that most people are quoting from is it Francis Burns' invasion model, Celtic invasion model, which has been disproven for decades now.
Mm. There is not like the fighting between, just to make this clear, and then we'll jump back over to the 9 Years' War again because we're trying to tie this back into the 9 Years' War. But just to be clear, the fighting between the Oenocta and the Ionel is a political war. It is not an ethnic war. There is no ethnic fighting between the men of Munster and the men of the what was they called? The Ionel. They all identify themselves as the Gael. Like if you read the Shanachus Mór, they define themselves as the people of Ireland, the people of the Gael. So they don't define themselves differently in the Shanachus Mór, which is up around the what was it, the 8th, 9th, and 10th century. So they are not defining, with the fighting going on between the men of Munster and the Ionel Confederation. There is over the political high kingship, whatever, the over kingship of Ireland. There is no ethnic fighting going on. It is literally them fighting over the over kingship of Ireland at the time, under the likes of Mael Shocknall, Flan Shinna, and those sort of kings, and then rising up to Brian Boru. But they do define themselves as the men of the Gael and the men of Era at the time. So there is no like, the Erin people are different to the Gael people. Like they're literally define themselves as one people at the time. And then you have a subgroup which is the Gaul Gael, which its direct translation is foreign Irish. They're the only people kind of outside of the field. but most people define themselves as Gael. So there's only two definitions in the early medieval period, which is Gael and Foreign Gael. Go on, Michal.
Here, no, it's just someone said here, why wouldn't there be, Mike, wouldn't there be, I don't know if that's to me or another Mike in the chat, but just in case, between Ireland and Britannia? There would be, that's what I'm saying. It's due to these massive, like not just mass, but micro transactions of trade, intermarriage, cultural sharing, warfare that lead to the creation of all these societies that happen all across Europe, Britain. We're all interconnected. There's no pure isolated group of individuals in Europe at this time creating these isolated societies. They're all interconnected in various different ways to various different degrees. So yeah, someone was in there, I think it was Factroller again, about the term where they start referring to themselves as Gaels or Irish, and or it's a term. I think he's going on about the Goidel, or which is from the Welsh Gwydl, which means like someone to do with in the woods, or like a bandit, or the how most people are termed or coined. The way that they coin themselves is normally written down, and then we use that later on, especially as a generalized term. I want to refer you to the term British Isles, which is referred to in some arguments, some circles, especially with people who lean towards more this ancient Brythonic group, Christney, being the natural inhabitants of Ireland, especially Ulster, before the Gaelic invasion. And it's the Greek, what's the Greek settlement in South France? Messina?
Oh, Malaysia.
Yeah. I can't remember the individual, but he's of Marseille anyway. And he is the cartographer who writes down in 250 BC or whatever the British Isles effectively. This is a term coined because he is getting his sources from British people or Britons, and from Roman traders who are interacting with these Britons. But that doesn't mean that everyone on those islands referred to it as the British Isles or the island of the British. It's just he knows a named group in that area and says, oh, that's the island of the Britons. But he's not saying that the Britons ruled the whole island or both islands. But modern interpretation of that by some people who want to use it politically is that, it says here on a map from 250 BC that this is the British Isles. But no, it's just he's an individual who's getting secondhand information from multiple sources who are using this term to describe the Isles, but that's not how individuals are describing it at the time. And the same can be used for Goidel, the same can be used for Crithny, the same can be used for the Erin, the same can be used for the Brigantes. These are terms coined normally by outsiders, not taken into political or societal context at the time. And just because we have this information now doesn't make it fact, as in like that is the point of what is happening on the ground to kings, chiefs, family leaders, individuals.
Very true. I just want to bring, unless someone has something else to expand on there, I just want to bring the conversation back to full circle again and talk about what we were originally talking about, and that is the 9 Years' War and the interpretation people and even the O'Briens, the McCarthys would have had of themselves. Going in the 9 Years' War, how do the O'Briens and the McCarthys define themselves? Did they see themselves as English? Did they see themselves as Irish? How do the McCarthys and the O'Briens define themselves in the 9 Years' War? Just going back to what we were talking about just a few seconds ago.
The McCarthys definitely saw themselves as Irish, as Gaelic Irish. They probably also saw themselves as McCarthys. That was an important identity for them. They also probably saw themselves as Catholic and perhaps as Munster men. The O'Briens, most of the O'Briens would have seen themselves as Gaelic Irish. However, during the 9 Years' War, the Earl of Thomond, is it Donegal O'Brien? Is it Donegal?
Mm.
He was becoming English. He wanted to become
Mm.
English. He was
Yeah.
anglicizing himself as best
Mm.
he could. His wife was from the English aristocracy.
Mm.
And like you see, whoever is the descendant, Lord Inchiquin at the moment, or the last one, and they speak with a very posh English accent.
Mm.
Like I think it's the same with the McGillicuddy guy in Kerry. There's a fair few of these people who claim to be leaders of clans in Ireland, whereas
Mm.
they're essentially English aristocrats with land in Ireland. The
Mm.
O'Briens, especially Inchiquin and his family, were very good at anglicizing himself. Who else was
Mm.
quite good at, say, re-anglicizing himself was the son of um, um, Granuaile, uh,
Mm.
Theobald slash Tibbet Burke. He becomes, I think it's Lord Mayo. I can't remember his title, but
Mm.
he he ran into difficulty because he was Catholic. The Earl
Yeah.
of Thomond, he was raised in England and become Protestant.
Mm.
But these people, they realized which way the wind was blowing, and they
Mm.
anglicized themselves very quickly. But the
Yeah.
McCarthys saw themselves as Gaelic Irish.
Mm. 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 That's interesting.
Caveman is just
Cool.
Caveman is
Yeah, I was
asking
about to
here
say
a
that.
very very interesting question.
Yeah, it
Would the
is.
Scottish Gaels and Irish Gaels see themselves as separate around 1601?
That's
No and yes.
interesting. Go on.
No and yes. There was Stephen Ellis. I think he's retired now, but he was
Mm.
a professor of history or senior lecturer in history in UCG.
Mm.
Um, he writes and he talks about the Gaeltacht. There was a
Mm.
Gaeltacht, which now it means an Irish-speaking area. In 1600, it meant the Gaelic universe.
Mm.
So um, the Ireland or Gaelic Ireland was very, very politically divided, but culturally united. So
Mm.
um, it crossed the border. The problem was the king in Scotland and the English were increasing problems or putting problems in the middle of this universe and separating it. So did the
Mm.
Reformation. But like you have someone like Campbell who becomes probably the most important noble in all of Scotland at certain times. But he's very Protestant, and he's looking towards Edinburgh. He's Scottish. How would you say Anglicizing in relation to Scotland? He doesn't want to become English, but he wants to become an Anglicized
European.
Scottish
Yeah.
noble. Edinburghing himself, maybe. I don't know. But he's doing that. He's kind of moving away from the Campbell's Gaelic background to an extent.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. All right. Just another correction as well, because people are saying, they said it early on as well, Scotty and Gael, just to define the two. Scotty and the Gael were the same word in the 5th century. It's just that the Romans used to refer to Irish pirates as Scotty. So just to clarify about the term Scoti, in the fifth and sixth century, the Romans, when they're documenting Irish pirates, they refer to them as Scoti. So that's the earliest form I know of the word. I know you guys are going extra romantic and you're trying to pull it all the way over to the Russian nomads, the Scythii. I don't specialize in ethnic DNA, to be honest with you, lads. Looking at the comment section, there's a good few of you that think you specialize in ethnic DNA, but I don't really see the evidence to prove that you specialize in ethnic DNA. But my point being is, if the Scotty are related to the Scythii, I wouldn't really know, to be honest with you. It'd be outside my field of expertise. But the earliest written document is the Latin word Scoti, which defines Irish pirates. So the Gael and the Scotty are the same people. It's just the Romans are defining the pirates as Scotty at the time. And then that word kind of evolves inside of Scotland, isn't it, Owen?
Yeah, like I think first of all, you have to bear in mind that Irish history starts with St. Patrick. And when I say
Mm,
history, I mean where we have written accounts.
yeah.
Um, it's only from then on that Irish starts being written. You have um, accounts about Ireland start being written. St. Patrick
Mm,
writes his letter, writes his confessio. Shortly afterwards, you have Owen emerging, and then you have various other things. Uh, Anything previous to that is really secondhand stuff. Like I saw earlier, Ptolemy's map being mentioned.
mm,
That is very problematic history. And people are
mm,
saying, oh, like he puts the Brigantes in Ireland. Yes, but how true is that? Like
mm,
he's copying from someone who spoke to someone who spoke to someone who spoke to someone. It's
mm,
not good history. What DNA has helped us, and
mm.
as I said before, like the last big change in Irish DNA was in the Bronze Age. Uh,
Yeah.
Irish will have similar DNA with people in England, with people in
Mm,
France, with people in Turkey, with people in Ukraine, because
yeah.
from what it seems, that DNA starts in the steppes and works its way
Mm,
across Europe. So bits
mm,
are going to be shared with everyone else who's living there.
yeah.
Now, when you start going towards legends like the Scythians, etc., no, the Ireland emerged before the Scythians emerged. The Scythians start getting
Mm,
noted by the Greeks.
yeah.
And I think it's a bit of a problematic label. They just showed up the
Yeah.
people north of their borders.
Mm, mm, mm.
Ireland, the Irish, the Gaelic Irish emerged in Ireland. You can't say this
Mm,
group were Irish, this group were pre-Irish. It's The Gaelic Irish were Irish.
mm,
The language may have come in, as it's a cultural, it belongs to the Celtic family. Um,
mm,
Borders were much more fluid. The Irish Sea was a highway; it wasn't a division. So we have to be
mm.
very, very, very careful when we
Yeah.
make these things. We have to admit that we don't know a lot of stuff. We don't
Yeah.
know 99% about before Patrick. We have no idea what the passage tomb builders called themselves. We have no
Mm,
idea what the people who built those stone rows and stone circles in Munster or in Ulster
yeah.
called themselves.
Mm, mm,
We
mm.
know that the DNA of the passage tomb builders has largely disappeared, whereas
Mm.
of the Bronze Age groups, it's still here.
Yeah. This is an interesting one to definitely expand on. And I'd love to hear your interpretation of this as well, Owen. Dennis asks a brilliant, brilliant question. Dennis McCarthy. He says, did the Stuarts come from a Gaelic background? What's the Stuarts' Gaelic background?
I
Or
feel
if they had
offended you're
any?
asking Owen.
And what's this?
I
Yeah,
feel offended
I
there.
was going to say I'm going to hand over to Mihal because that's his area, not mine.
The
And well,
Stuarts,
I go on.
the Stuarts come from Brittany, but they're
Yeah.
not from like in the one of the or they're not recorded as being part of the Brythonic or Brittonic nobility in
Mm,
the area. So a lot of the native families, but that their earliest sort of paper record seems to come from Brittany, and then they make their way north when they're a lot of sort of Normans are King David II is reared in England and
mm,
educated in along with I can't remember the English prince that he's raised with, but regardless, and then he takes a lot of ideas and he grants lands. He brings up with him a load of Norman, Flemish. But I'll use the all-encompassing term Norman, Anglo-Norman, but they're from mostly from Northern Europe,
mm,
um, knights and families, and they settle up in. So you've got the Elliots, you've got the Grants, you've got the Stewarts, etc., that are all given lands, and from those from those initial settlers uh, are the descendants of great Scottish families. The Campbells are not Gaelic either, even though their surname is a Gaelic term, or to take it from a Gaelic word, crooked mouth. They're more than likely from a Brittonic group. The DNA seems to sort of suggest that they were a Brittonic group, although they went to great lengths to prove their Gaelic heritage, as a lot of Scottish families did, by encompassing a bit of mythology and links to the O'Dunia family. Some of their earlier sources say they are paternal line from the O'Dunia, and others that they are married into them, and it was through that marriage that they were granted their lands in Loch Awe, I think it is, which is the MacArthurs are actually the senior line of the Campbells, but the Campbells obviously start to become more powerful due to their links to Robert the Bruce. So they're more than likely, I think genetics sort of says they are probably a native Brythonic family, landed family, who then, whenever surnames came along, by this time Gaelic is the predominant language in the area, so they take on a Gaelic surname, and then they obviously become very anglicized later on. They're heavily involved in sort of pro-British politics through the Jacobite Wars.
But it's interesting as well, because as Dennis says there, and there's another brilliant question that fits into what you're saying as well over on TikTok. The Stewarts, when they're meeting up with the O'Neills, would the O'Neills see the Stewarts as kind of brotherans? You know, the way that Dennis is asking the question there. Oh, where's this question gone? About how the Stewarts in Ireland, would they have been seen as Gael? Would the Stewarts be seen as Gaelic when they came over to Ireland, especially during the 9 Years' War? I think that's where Dennis is trying to indicate and push us.
The Stewarts, the Stewarts had no real, as a clan, as a group, they had no real role in the 9 Years' War. James of Scotland had a lot of contact with O'Neill. He was kind of happy to see O'Neill doing well, but not too well, because O'Neill was buying a lot of gunpowder from Scotland. So there was, but so James didn't like. You can leave him outside. He doesn't really matter that much in the 9 Years' War. But after the death of Elizabeth and after Meliphant, several, at least one or two poets, perhaps because they were paid, wrote praise poems in praising James, in which they stress that he's really Gaelic. It is. It's a bit of an invention on their part. It's a bit of a leap, because James wouldn't have seen himself as Gaelic at all. He didn't particularly like Gaelic Scotland or Gaelic Ireland. He tended to look down on them as barbarians, as a lot of people did at that stage. And in a way, it was probably a local lord. I've read about it, but I can't remember, who paid these people to write these poems, thinking that he might get some benefit or advantage in Ireland, though that didn't really happen. Dennis also asked another question much before about the Hovendens. One of Henry Hovenden was O'Neill's kind of right-hand man. He was very close to O'Neill, and there's letters found between the two of them where Henry is giving O'Neill advice. He was like his strategic advisor in many ways. Now, the Hovendens are New English, but they were Catholic New English. And as Hiram Morgan shows, there is this myth that O'Neill was brought up in England. He wasn't. He was fostered by the Hovendens, who lived in the Northern Pale. They were Catholic, and Henry is very, very close to O'Neill. He even goes on he stays with O'Neill after Meliphant, and he goes with O'Neill to Europe in the Flight of the Earls. So he's a very interesting person. I think he returns to Ireland eventually. I'm not sure what happens to the family. Henry Hovenden has a castle in the west of Tyrone, somewhere near the border with Donegal, which the English captured in 1602. But he's an interesting guy that is kind of ignored in Irish history.
Yeah, I think whenever you're talking, so people are a lot of discussion here about culture, ethnicity, and genetics and stuff like. Another, like, if you just look at two examples in Scotland, you have the Elliots, who are Norman knights. I can't remember exactly. I think they're Flemish.
Mm,
They've settled in England. They've come from Flemish background. They've settled in England. Then they've settled in England for a couple of generations. Then they're taken up to Scotland with King David II, and they're given lands in a Gaelic area of Scotland in the northeast, around Moray, Aberdeenshire, and they're there for a couple of generations, intermarrying with the Gaelic speaking people in that area before they then move down to the borderlands, and become Reivers,
mm,
and vice versa. You have the Sinclairs, who are another family, Saint Clair. So I think they're another Norman family, and they're in the border regions. Sorry, when the Elliots are in the border regions, they're still acting Gaelic or Gaelic culture. They're still operating as a clan, not as a Reaver family. They don't operate the same way as a Reaver family. They're still able to keep their septs within their political sphere, unlike Reavers, who would all the septs would operate independently and would only work with each other if it worked to a shared cause. But the Sinclairs were Norman family, end up being Reavers, and then move their land. They're given new lands in the north, and 100 years later, they are still promoting Scots language poetry. Um,
mm,
so it really shows the blurred lines between it all. Now, what when you want to sit there and go, well, what did that individual see themselves as? Well, I mean, the evidence is that obviously that the Elliots had leaned far more into their Gaelic background,
mm,
rather than their Norman or the Reivers that they're ruling over. And the same with the Sinclairs. They've leaned still far further into their Scots background, even though they're in a largely Norse Gaelic area. They go to Orkney, sorry. So they're in a heavily Norse area with some Gaelic influence, but they're still promoting Scots English. Um,
mm,
and I mean English with an I, not an E. Yeah, I mean, it will boil down to what does the individual at the time or the family at the time see themselves as? What culture are they sort of absorbing themselves into? Um, Rather than ethnicity, because how one problem I have with when people use ethnic arguments for whether a certain society or group, clan, tribal, they're this haplogroup, they're this, is that nobody ever stops at the same point when they're describing how far back we should go. Oh, I'm an Anglo-Saxon. Oh, I'm a Celt. But then nobody stops at the same point. If someone said to me, okay, we're all going to go back to 250 BC, and whatever your paternal line was at 250 BC, you're that. But nobody ever
mm.
does. No, and nobody ever goes back further and goes, "Well, I'm Bell Beaker. I'm etc." I mean, they always pick these heavily romanticized society or cultural groups, and never these far off ones or anything. So I think it sounds a bit racist to me, if I'm being brutally honest. Like,
Well, it's a bit mad in the comment section, but you see, this is the thing about people identifying themselves. Is it first off, when especially looking at Irish medieval history, it depends what point in history you're talking about because we use the term Old English, but the term Old English only pops up around, if Owen O'Neill wants to correct me on this one, starts to pop up after the 9 Years' War. I think maybe it's around before the 9 Years' War, if Owen O'Neill wants to correct me on this one. But
A
maybe,
little, but I think,
yeah.
yeah, it comes in with kind of with James, and
Yeah,
it
but that term Old English,
I use it
that's
when I
yeah,
write because
mm,
it's an easy
yeah,
word. The Old English in 1590 saw themselves as English, the English of
mm,
Ireland or the Irish
yeah.
English, if you like.
But
But
my
they
main point
definitely
there
were.
is it depends on what era you're talking about. If you take the Desmond Fitzgeralds, for example, 1 minute they're defining themselves as the English of Ireland. They first start off and they're defining themselves as French. Halfway through in the 15th century, they're defining themselves as Florentines. Then the next minute, they're defining themselves. If you take Garrod Fitzgerald, the poet Fitzgerald, for example, he's defining himself as being Irish. It depends what era you're talking about, because these are different people with different interpretations over a period of 1,000 years of medieval history. And so, as Mihal was indicating there, what happens is that depending what's happening politically, a leader will turn around and say, "Oh, I was a part of that ethnic group. My ancestor killed 10,000 men. I now have the biggest sausage." That's what it ultimately comes down to, a majority of the time. And this isn't just in Ireland, by the way. This happens through all of Europe, where people will turn around, depending on what's happening in front of them, and will turn around and says, "Well, my ancestors killed 10,000 people. They're related to the person that owned that land. I officially, by the right of God, now own that land." That's medieval history. So when looking into, because I see people quoting left, right, and center, and then trying to make ethnic justifications back, and I'm like, where are they getting this information from? Because I know, when, for example, so and so is defining themselves on so and so era, that's in that specific era. But if you go back, you'll have them defining themselves completely different 100 years prior, because that was 100 years ago, where people have a completely different interpretation of the world around them. Or am I just waffling shite?
um, I tend to agree with you. Just to answer Tungenstein Phil, James Fitzgerald, a Sugon Earl. What he doesn't know what Sugon means. Sugon means straw rope. He was the straw rope. I use a rope that's not very good. It's like not a very strong rope. I think one thing about identity, it depends who you're talking to and the context.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Irish in the 9 Years' War, the Irish said to the Spanish, "Oh, we're Spanish. Our ancestors came from Spain, so therefore you have to support us."
Yeah.
And in 1508, the Desmonds signed a treaty with Habsburg, basically making them Habsburg subjects. So identity is something that changes a lot. Sort of,
Yeah.
you're watching Ireland play England. You are an Irish person, but then say it's Cork against Kerry. Your county comes in, and then
Yeah.
you're from. I live in Valencia. When Valencia are playing Portmagee, the identities change again. And then throw in religion, then throw in your job. Are you a blacksmith? Are you a warrior? Are you a judge? Are you a poet? Oh yeah, I agree with the ghost of Robert.
I do.
I see now. That was brilliant as well.
Simplified version. That's a simplified version.
Yeah.
It's wild, And in the end of the day, we're only always human anyway, aren't we? Was the 9 Year War a Catholic rebellion? Go on.
This will have to be the last question, I think.
Speak for yourself. I'm an alien.
That's how my father identifies himself as well. Go on.
Was it a Catholic rebellion? It depends who you ask.
Okay.
I would say it wasn't a rebellion, it was a war. It starts as a rebellion as such in Ulster, but then becomes a war all over Ireland, and then an international war because Spain got involved. O'Neill used the religious thing. The English were dead afraid because they were convinced that all the Catholic Irish were going to slaughter them in their beds. So they were afraid of this. But the majority of the old English Catholics didn't want to. They put themselves under the command of Gaelic lords, and they saw themselves as English. They didn't want to fight against Elizabeth. So they said it's not a religious war. Various Spanish clerics sat down for months and discussed it, and eventually said, yes, it is a religious war. So I would say it's a war that had a very strong religious aspect.
Okay. It's interesting. Okay, so we'll start to finish it up there unless Mihal has a few more questions he wants to answer or anything like that.
I'll just say that as much as we can all laugh and argue and, it's great to see passion, I will just say, remember one thing, we're all always learning, including everyone in the chat. Nobody's saying that they have all the answers, but just always try and keep it respectful. At the end of the day, there's no need to get so heated and debated about societies and cultures that are 1,000, 2,000 years old. It's old news, literally.
Mm, that's it. And not to get too work up on it, life
Yeah.
goes on. You will be dead soon, and in 100 years' time, will be long forgotten. So it would have meant nothing anyway. Just keep that
I'm
in
going to live
mind.
forever. I've just decided.
Anyway, right, lads, talking about not living forever. I have a class this time tomorrow, well, an hour earlier, over on my Patreon. That's going to be covering the Scottish War of Independence. If you're interested in the Irish fighting in the Scottish War of Independence, or just the Irish, the Scottish War of Independence in general, definitely head on over to my Patreon. I think it's more important now than ever, especially since YouTube. Would you believe it? I didn't say this to you, Mihal. Would you believe, Mihal? What was it called? The Scottish War of Independence was completely copyrighted on YouTube. So all my old videos that I spent hours and hours and hours studying and researching on the Scottish War of Independence was copyrighted, which is quite funny because I referenced, everybody that I had been working with, but the actual source itself has been recently copyrighted on YouTube. So that's all gone now. So all my old videos to do with the Scottish War of Independence, all gone. So if you want to check that out, you're going to have to go over to my Patreon and subscribe. And on top of that as well, guys, I am actually starting a whole load of presentations for the next 2 months or so on the Scottish War of Independence as well. So I don't know if it came in time or what's the crack, but regardless, if you want to check out my work to do with the Irish and the Scottish War of Independence, you'll have to pop on over to my Patreon at Irish Medieval History. So starting tomorrow, I have classes on for about 20 quid a month. And if you just want to support my work in general, especially since YouTube is kicking me again, definitely head on over to my Patreon at Irish Medieval History. Miho, what plans do you have coming up at Clans and Dynasties? Or have you just given up, or what's the crack?
No, well, I'm posting every day on Facebook. Nice wee posts there if you want to, read up on any sort of posts I've been putting up. I'm trying to get that back active after the passing of our friend Wayne, and he was quite the one that sort of got it going. So I've taken over that mantle. I will continue to post videos when I have time, but I will continue with my members only lives, which have turned into generic lives for the time being till I can figure it out. Every second Wednesday. So I've just had on this Wednesday, so there won't be one Wednesday coming, but the Wednesday after. I'll just say that if you want to support the channel, just watch, like the videos, comment. Feel free to leave massive long comments like the Ghost Robert the Bruce has left, which I will read. Or just reach out to email. I'm about to actually have hopefully a very good conversation with the back controller over email about some things that I want to get his perspectives on. So just like, follow, and watch the videos.
Every day. And Owen, do you have any plans for today or over the week or so? Anything else you want to expand on? Or
Tomorrow I have a video coming out on history and pseudo-history related to Ireland.
Oh, nice.
Which,
was that a response to a so-and-so that we were talking about?
yeah, and I'll see how that does. So if you want to, just follow me on First Fassa, subscribe, leave messages, or not messages, leave comments on the videos. They always help. If you want to support me, I have a Buy Me a Coffee account. I've been slow. My personal circumstances, because my mother is very sick, have been very difficult over the last 2 months. But hopefully, it will improve again. So I have loads of ideas for videos. No, I haven't been able to write or to film.
I assume. Go on.
Go ahead.
Because that will be. Have you seen Bertie's new? Because Bertie actually released a new video in the last 2 hours. Have you seen his new video on that one?
On what? I haven't seen it.
He's right. So you were talking about his short on the Oh, you know
Scotia,
that
yeah.
Scotia, yeah.
Scotia's Grey, which is a
Yeah, what
19th
was it?
century
2 hours
invention.
ago. Yeah, 2 hours ago, he just released a full 2 hour video on that one. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't. I haven't.
Okay. Yeah, I
We'll talk
definitely
about
would
it.
say.
We'll
Go
talk
on.
about it after.
Yeah. All I want to say is, okay, just head on over to Owen O'Neill and see what Owen O'Neill's reaction to all that would be. And definitely head on over to Bertie's channel as well. He's got a whole thing on Scutia. Go and check out Bertie's channel and then head on over to Owen's channel as well. And you can see how it will all fit in to your perspective on medieval history and all that kind of stuff this week. I think that's pretty much it. We'll start to finish up there. Thanks very
Brilliant.
much, guys, for all the support.
I just
And
want to say, I want to say,
one,
I want to say thanks to my mother. It's very, very bad. It's waiting for the
mm,
anti-sensitive, but thanks anyway. And I'm not sure if Tom is asking me why he can't subscribe to my channel. He should be able to.
oh, give us a second. I'll have a look.
Just while you're doing that, Davey, we spent the first hour and a half talking about that. I think you came in a bit late. If you, whenever the live ends, you should just be able to scroll back to the beginning. But we did spend the first hour and a half sort of talking about it. Sorry, I think you came in probably the last half hour, where we kind of went to the comment section. And then it went a bit mad. But
Yeah.
right, so I'll just end this. So until you were checking to see about how to subscribe to Owen's.
I think Owen's channel is working perfectly grand. Maybe you got some warning or something. I would experiment with that. I was just over on Owen's channel right now. It seems to be working perfectly fine. So you shouldn't have any problem subscribing. I'm playing around with it now and it seems perfectly fine. From my perspective, yeah, it's all working perfectly fine.
Okay, then. Well, with that, Kat, take care. All right, everyone. Thank you very much
Oh
for
no,
joining.
sorry, just yeah, Tom. I don't offer a paid subscription yet. I have plans to eventually, but at the moment I'm not. I can't. I just too busy with paid work to be able to offer something paid. But eventually
Yeah.
I will. Eventually I will.
We'll let you know, and we'll all let you know, and then you can all rush there and support his channel. But until then, everyone, take care of yourselves.
All right. See you.